Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the launch of the Sellovatorz live stream here on LinkedIn, brought to you by myself, Denise Martha Bachman, and my guest for today is Rodney Steele. So if you don't know him, you're going to get to know him shortly. But I wanted to just welcome everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your day. And just to kick us off, tell us where you are calling or watching us from. I'm here in Houston. Rodney, where are you located?
I'm in New York,
I
Long
love
Island to
New
be
York.
specific. So the North Fork.
I love New York. In the wintertime, actually, during Christmas, Bryant Park is one of my favorite
Mm,
places to be. Love
Bryant
that.
Park's great. Yeah, I used to spend a lot of time at Bryant Park. I like used to eat lunch there. It's very nice.
Yeah, and at
Good
Christmas
spot.
time, they have the traditional, everyone knows I'm
All the
German,
shops.
but yes, they have it's like the German Christmas market.
You know what's funny too is that it's like they're so small. Like there's those little tents, and
Mhm.
it's never. It's actually sometimes when I'm in there looking around, I'm like, it's so hot in here. You know what I mean? And you're literally outside, and you're like, how is this possible? And when you go into stores, and it's like it's freezing cold in here. That's
Uh-huh.
an interesting challenge to keep it warm in there.
Yeah, it is. You're right. All right. So, for those of you that don't know, Sellovatorz is my sales program, and I had been doing the Sellovatorz audio events, and while I loved them, I just really wanted to go live instead of doing the audio events. I still have an audio event that's with a trio that's on Thursday. You can find more information about that, but this is really a live associated or specific just to sales. So, if most everyone knows, it's all about sales, AI, and humanity, bringing all of that together for me. And this is the sales arm of my live stream. So today, I think I've posted and everyone saw, we're going to really talk about how to build prospecting systems that actually work for you, and Rodney is the king at this. So he's going to share a little bit about himself as soon as I pass it on over to him. And then we're going to dive right into the topic, because we know that cold calling, prospecting is really a hot topic right now. Do we cold
Mhm.
call? Do we not? Do we manage to outbound leads? Do we work just to bring inbound leads? If we're cold calling, what the heck are we doing wrong? Because we know that it's anywhere from 2% to 7 or 8% success rate. Just depends on what medium that you're leveraging for those
Mhm.
cold calls. So we're going to talk about all those things, and also we're going to differentiate what a lead and a prospect might be. So we're going to talk about that briefly in a moment as well. But I'm going to just pass it on over right now to Rodney, allow him to do his own introduction, and then we'll kick off the conversation.
Thank you, Denise. So I'm Rodney Steele. I That's all. No, I'm joking.
That's
Joking.
it.
I am the CEO of Dinsmore Steel, which is a PO brokerage or comparison service, and then I'm a partner in a company called Volare, which is a cold email marketing and lead generation company. I've been doing this now for 20 something years, and I've been in sales my entire life. I remember when I used to work at a bank, right? When I was in college, and they used to have these these things and say like, oh, you got to sell accounts or whatever. And I realized very early on when I closed 15 that day, I was like, I might be all right in sales. So I've been doing this. I've been selling things a long time. My mom used to say, my wife and I went to visit her a while back, and she said, "Do you remember when you used to sell that Boy Scout popcorn? Because the Boy Scouts sell popcorn and the Girl Scouts sell cookies, right?"
Cookies, correct? Yes.
And I used to knock on people's doors, and I would say, "Hey, and this is how I would frame it. It was funny. I would say, they used to come in tins. I don't know what it's like now. They used to come in these tins, and it was like regular corn, regular kettle, and something else, right? Caramel or whatever. And I used to say to people, you can get all three tins. I don't know what it was, but let's say it was like $10, right? I would say you can get all three tins for $10, And it was like, again, I don't remember what it was, but let's say each tin was like $2 or $3 or whatever it was. And people used to say, how do you sell all the tins? And I was like, because I don't give them an option to buy just one, right? I would say you can get all three of these tins for, $10, whatever it was. And it was funny. Then I realized like this might be how you sell. I don't know, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I don't remember how I sold, but I always sold a lot of Girl Scout cookies. And
Hmm.
anytime that I had a fundraiser, even before I started in sales, because like you, I've been in sales for over 30 years. So for me, I've always been selling, but I always sold a ton of them. But don't ask
Hmm.
me how I sold them because I can't even remember that far back. So the fact that you can,
But I sold a ton of popcorn, but I've eaten my body weight numerous times in Girl Scout cookies. I used to say all the time, right? I think the boys got shortchanged because if I could sell those cookies, although to be honest with you, I don't really like popcorn, but I think I may have eaten the products if I had had the cookies.
yeah, Thin Mints and Samoas are my
Oh
favorite.
my
And they're
God,
not
they're
even called
incredible.
Samoas, or I don't even think they're called Thin Mints anymore either.
No, there's something else, but yeah,
Yeah.
they're amazing. They're
They
so
are
good.
amazing. So a plug for Girl Scout cookies. I think you
Yeah,
might could still get them right now if you wanted to.
they're incredible.
They are. All right. Well, you've been in sales for forever, but right now you are, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about
Sure.
the evolution of your career, but you're right now in PEO, which is a
Hmm.
whole different interesting area or space that you sell in. So maybe
Sure.
give us an evolution
Yeah.
of we know you started out in the Boy Scouts, but where to go
That's
from
right.
there.
I came from the Boy Scouts to here, right? Yeah. So I originally I'm from North Carolina. I went to Carolina and for finance, and I graduated and moved to New York to work in finance. And in 2008, while I was on vacation, I realized that I needed to get a different job. The world was crumbling, and I was home watching TV, hanging out. One of my friends called me and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I said, "I'm watching bad reality TV and trying to figure out my next move." And he said, "His brother, yeah, it was his brother. He's like, started a company, needs to raise money." So I went over to this company. It was a startup. I had never worked at a startup before. I showed up the first day in a suit, and I remember I don't know, an hour or so because I'm like early, so I was there at like 6 o'clock in the morning, and one of the guys let me in, whatever. He's really nice, and he said to one of the founders, he's like, I think the guy from the IRS or something's here. Some guy with a suits on. I wasn't from the IRS, but anyway, one of the conditions of them getting funded is they had to go into a PEO, and I had no idea what that was. I never heard of it, didn't know what it was. Made a couple calls, figured out what it was, and decided that I wanted to do that. And then when I got into fast forward when I got into PEO, um, I didn't have like a lot of connections that were natural for PEO, right? So I was like, how am I going to, get people? It's very difficult to cold call. It's very difficult to cold call in Manhattan. The other thing that the company I started out with PO really illustrated, and I understand it's like demographics. But they were like, you got to go into businesses and get business cards, and that's impossible in Midtown Manhattan. It's not going to happen, And they're like, well, why can't you go in there and get a business card? And I said, because the guy with the machine guns, he's not going to just let me roam around.
Yeah.
So my point is, I had to get creative. So I said, how can I leverage who I do know to find people I need to know? And I was able to do that through email and LinkedIn. And that's how I became, good. And then again, right, I used to do email blasts, cold email blasts, if you will. Well, they weren't cold then; they were coming from my inbox. But I used to do them. I don't know, couple hundred a week. Maybe I was sending out a couple hundred emails a week.
So when you say that you used LinkedIn, I mean, this was a while ago. So how
Yeah,
long
this
ago?
was oh man, this was like 2009, 2008, 2009.
Okay, wow. So
This is
in
back when you sent a LinkedIn message, people replied.
well, okay, but look at the quality of the LinkedIn
Yeah,
DMs that you get now.
that's
That's
true.
a whole nother conversation topic that we could talk about
Hmm.
should we have any time. But LinkedIn, I can remember, I mean, I've been on LinkedIn since probably the inception of LinkedIn, but
Hmm.
I never really leveraged LinkedIn so until maybe actually 2020, if I'm being really honest. Maybe I might have been on there a little bit more active in 19, but not that much. So the fact that you were already using it in 2008 is amazing. So you leveraged that
Hmm.
to get opportunities scheduled.
Yeah, so this is what I used to do. So when I started working in PO, I didn't. I knew a lot of people. So like when I first got on LinkedIn, I was like early on it. You could connect with literally anybody. But it was
Mm-hmm.
mostly just people you knew.
Mm-hmm.
And most people I knew were in finance, banking, mortgages, lending, whatever it was, trading, so forth. So I literally would look up people, CFOs. I would just do the searches. I had what is it, Net Sales Navigator? I don't think they had that then, but it was something else, whatever it was called, Premium, I think it was, or In or something. And I would literally, no exaggeration, sit at my desk for an hour or two every day building lists. And this sounds crazy, and people are like, oh, people don't believe me when I say this, but I had to literally like a canned message. I don't remember what it was, but it was like, hi, whatever their name was, blah 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 blah. Maybe like a couple of sentences. And I physically would sit there and copy and paste it into each message. So if I sent 200 messages, I physically did that 200 times. And I just kept doing it over and over and over and over and over again. And then what I would do is that I always believe, I don't want to get too far ahead in here, but I always believe in omni-channel. So I would do, this is what I would do, is I would email them on LinkedIn, right? And say, hey, I'm Rodney, blah, blah, blah. What I would do is I would send them a connection request first, right? With a note. If you, back then, if you sent 10, 8 of them would connect, or, whatever.
Whatever, yeah.
And then once I connected with them, I would physically send them a message, right? And say, hey, thanks so much for connect, whatever. And then what I would do is because now I had their email, right? Because I'm connected to them. Then I would email them and say, hey, we just connected on LinkedIn, blah, blah, blah. And then this kind of ties into cold calling. Then I would call them. And you say, well, why would you call them? Because I'm not cold calling anymore. We're connected. I've sent you an email. You've replied. If you don't know who I am now, then either you're not paying attention, right? Or so I always just say, like, now I have a reason to call.
Yep.
And that really helped me. But yeah, I used to literally just bang out every message. It was a lot of work.
Well, let's fast forward though to today.
Sure.
I mean, we're inundated with LinkedIn DMs, and this will really be a great segue into how to do a better job at prospecting, right? But if you fast forward to LinkedIn DMs today, we're inundated. Even before they get to a DM, when they're actually requesting to connect, I mean, I'll say yes without much discretion.
Do you say yes if they don't follow you?
I actually didn't even realize.
If you don't follow me, you're an automatic decline unless I know you. It's not even
See, and I didn't even know. So how do you determine whether or not they're following you?
So it'll say, no, so here's what happens. So it'll say, so-and-so has requested to connect with you. Or it says so-and-so follows you and has requested to connect.
Yes.
And then you hit accept or decline. If it doesn't say follows you, they're done.
Oh, good to know. So this is a little LinkedIn tidbit that I just learned. So for those of you that did not really hear what Rodney just said, if you connect with someone before you do, when you get the request, I actually didn't know that there was a distinguishing kind of string below it, but it'll say either request to connect or they follow and are
and is requested to connect. Yes, right. Because when they follow you, right, not to get too far ahead, but I do a newsletter, right? And if you do a newsletter or you write articles, whatever you're publishing on LinkedIn, if they follow you, then they're notified. If they don't follow you, then they're just another face in the crowd.
Well, back in the day, however, if I'm not mistaken, if you connected, you were automatically following them then.
Right, that's correct. It used to be that way.
Okay.
Now here's the thing. So let me back up. If someone, like, let's say you and I are obviously connected, but let's say I connected to you, you'll automatically follow me, but unless I follow you and then connect, you're just following me.
Oh, this is a wealth of information. So for those of you that want to go back and listen, it's at 13 minutes and I don't know, 38 seconds. Yeah, so 13.38, maybe a little bit. So fast forward or rewind a bit, but I'll try to put that in the notes in the comments below after, because that's a wealth of information. Because it is really, if we talk about prospecting, it's how you play the game. And the game today is very different than it was before. Going back to this, inundated with, I don't pay attention necessarily to who I accept the connection request, let alone when they DM. So when they actually DM though, if it seems like, if it's just a, hey, how are you? I'm usually not going to respond. If it's a pitch slap, I'm not going to respond then either. It's only if they actually spend some time trying to understand me and are writing something that is of value. And I know that it's not a robot or a machine, which I think now at this point, this is a great segue, Rodney, to really dive into a bit more about how we prospect for systems, because the way we're doing it today is not working. The success rate is really low. You and I talked about that. Success rate is low, and we have to differentiate ourselves from all of those other people that are doing it today. I don't mind cold calling, but there are lots of people who don't love it at all. And it's it can be tedious, overwhelming, and confusing. So how do we kind of muddle through all of that
Sure.
and create a system that is the most effective? So maybe share with us some of
Sure.
the things that you've been doing.
So to touch on what you said, I just want to clarify one thing is that, and this is, you may agree, may disagree. I think you will agree, but just to clarify, there's, in my mind, right, there's two types of people in sales. There's closers and there's openers, right?
Yes.
And it's like, I don't know if you follow baseball, but Mariano Rivera, the best closer in my opinion of all time. He couldn't pitch more than 2 innings, right? That's not what he's built for. He can't go out and throw, 7 innings. His arm will give out. But so what I mean is that a lot of times companies will hire someone, right? It happened to me. They'll hire you, they'll pay you, a significant amount of money, they'll pay you a nice commission, and they're like, go get leads, right? I'm going to be completely transparent with everybody on this. I'm terrible at cold calling, terrible at it. I don't like it. I don't enjoy it. I'm not good at it. I'm good on the phones. I'm not good at cold calling, right? So what I think, getting to our point, what I think is that I think a lot of people get hired and they're closers, they're not openers. So I think what happens is that, and at least in my, in the companies I own and I've been, that I'm involved in, we try to automate prospecting. And here's what I mean is that 80% of your prospecting should be automated. And I'll explain it. So like for us, I'll give you an example. So with my company, Valaria, right, with the company I'm involved in, a lot of times people come to us and let's say they work with people that are in HubSpot, right? And nothing against HubSpot. It could be Salesforce. You could pick a technology. And what happens is that a lot of people will send out emails and call and this and that and say, hey, you're interested in HubSpot. You don't want to find people that are interested in HubSpot. You want to find people that are using HubSpot or whatever the technology is, right? So if somebody's for example, using, I'm just going to pick on ADP, right, just for a second. If someone's using ADP and I'm calling from Paychecks, that's somebody I want to talk to. If I'm working at ADP and I'm calling people that have never used payroll before, you're just wasting time, right? You might get somebody, but so what I'm going with it is that when you're looking for people that you think are good prospects, there's two ways to identify it. Who are your current clients? So like if I started a job tomorrow at a company, right? Say I went to work for you tomorrow, I would say, who are your clients? And if you said, these are my 500 clients, I would look for a pattern amongst them, right? Are they in tech? Are they women-led businesses? Are they in a specific area? What's happening, right? What do they need? And then once you find out who that is, when I call it the ICP, the ideal client profile,
Yeah.
then you find those people. Where I think a lot of people mess up is they don't know where to find them. They go on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is great. Believe me, I love LinkedIn. LinkedIn is good once you have a list, right? But one of the ways that we've been very successful in building and automating is through, believe it or not, Indeed, the job site. Yeah, and just to give you an example, the reason that I think Indeed works is because most companies don't hire people if they're going to go out of business or they're not doing well, right? The second reason is that they're a wealth of information. For example, we have a client now that does SAP consulting, or they set up SAP and for people. So we go in and we find people that are using SAP or an SAP-like product. And we'll say to them, hey, listen, are you, notice you're currently using SAP. We have another client that uses Klaviyo. You just find out the technologies and then you find out these people. And what I find interesting, I posted this a while back in my newsletter, is a walkthrough on Indeed, how you literally find companies. So if you go into Indeed, right, and this is a blank page, and it says, what are you looking for? Type in whatever it is. So in this case, I would type in HubSpot, but you put it in parentheses, and then don't put in an area, just leave it blank, right? If you have to put in an area, put in United States. Don't put in like Texas or whatever. And if you hit enter, it'll pull every company that has that listed in their profile.
So if you think about, I think just this alone is golden, because most of us, so for example, in a traditional way, because like you, I can cold call and I can do it. I'm not afraid of it. I can get a message. I can have some success, but I don't love cold calling either. It's just not my gig, right? I'm like you, very much more a closer. I didn't love, would never have done a BDR or SDR role, just not in my DNA, right? Can do it, but if I have to be driven by it, I'm going to suck at it, right? Because I don't love it. Right. And you got to love what you do. So for me, if in the past I would have said, okay, for example, if I want to sell my sales program, I'm going to look at anyone who has a sales team. Well, I mean, that could be just about anyone, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But so now what I, instead of creating a list of just the sales teams, I've niched it down to startup companies. But
Hmm.
now even I'm looking at startup companies who are hiring because they're either doing really well and need to expand, or I'm looking at revenues right now. Are they not hitting their revenue targets, which means
Hmm.
that their sales teams is sucking terribly bad,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I've niched it down, but that takes, I mean, I've been in sales for over 30 years. I'm almost 52 years old. It's taken me a long damn time to figure out how to get to that point, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so what you're saying is, instead of going just to all salespeople, to niching it down as much as you possibly can, so that you are, and not just niching down, but looking at those who are actually going to need your service rather than
Hmm.
just going and spreading a blanket over everyone. Correct?
That's
Did I
right.
summarize that
That's exactly
accurately?
right. Yeah. And here's why I'll say that, right? Is that like, so in my mind, and people disagree with me on this, I'm not here to educate. I'm here to help. So here's what I mean. A lot of people will spend, like when I first started in PEO, for example, a lot of people didn't know what it was. People still don't know what it is, but I'm not going to bore you. I'll put you to sleep with it. But um, so instead of trying to find people that want to learn about it, I try to find people that are already using it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they know what it is. A lot of times I find that people, like for example, if I worked in cars, right? If I was selling cars, I'm not going to waste my time on people that don't have a car, right? I'm going to waste my time on people, or I'm going to spend my time on people that have a car, because then I have to explain to the guy or the lady that doesn't have a car why they should get a car. I'm not interested. If you don't know that, I can't help you. So I think a lot of times people will waste a lot of time explaining why you should do something. You need to find people that understand why they need it. They just need it, right? The other thing I would say too is, and I'll use your example with startups, is you have to go where they are. So let me give an example, like with PO, just to give you an example, we've had a significant amount of success with golf courses, right? Using PO. So you work in reverse, right? When we signed our first golf course, right? I said to myself, what are the challenges they face? And people used to all the time, and even myself, I feel like, most of the services that we sell solve the same thing. So like, for example, if somebody is a startup, right, and they're not selling enough, that's the same problem for every company, Fortune 500, enterprise level, whatever it may be, right? The challenge is that you have to speak to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like, for example, the same challenges that a retail store would have are going to be the exact same challenges, right, that a grocery store would have, or a hedge fund. And you say, what do you mean? Because everybody needs payroll, everybody needs benefits, everybody needs all these things, right? The difference is in the delivery and the messaging. And here's what I
Yep.
mean is that, like, I think like you got to go one step further. So like, for example, if I was working with, in your case, startups, then I would niche down and say, these are companies that are pre-seed,
Yep.
seed A, whatever it may be.
Yep.
And then you write specifically to them. So when they read it, or they read the messaging and the messages that you're sending, like this guy. So like, if we run an ad campaign, right? Or if we run a campaign, it's all centered around one thing, right? Whatever their problem is. And I think a lot of times what happens is that people go out and I call it a shotgun approach, where they just start shooting, right? And a lot of times what I think you should do is you should narrow it down. So like when I first started Dinsmore Steel, right? My primary focus was finance companies, hedge funds, VCs, private equity, things like that. Can we help everybody? Yeah, but you know, that's what people really needed and resonated with.
Well, and when I define, so we're talking because you and I are entrepreneurs, right? We own our
Mhm.
own business. But what I think I think this applies even in the corporate world, right? So even if you're a corporate sales rep, or you're a leader of a sales organization, helping your teams really define what you're looking for. So for me, when I look at startups, I don't want an A seed. I'll do a B if
Mhm.
they're on the transition from B to C, because that means they've already had some sales. They've already got formed a sales team, and
Mhm.
they're probably not doing well, because Salesforce.com they had a number reported that last year only 28% of salespeople actually hit their target, hit their quotas, right? So they probably aren't doing well. So they're
Mm-hmm.
funded and they've had a sales team for a little bit of time and they're probably sucking. Those are the people that I want to go after. I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
go to the larger D and E because they've already built their sales team. They're probably not open. That's the least of their worries right now because now they're focused on getting the technology and additional. Because once you get to C to end of C to D, it becomes the focus shifts a bit more. So I've niched that down because I'm an
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneur. But even if I reflect back on my corporate days, if I'd have done a better job, instead of spraying and praying, if I'd have done a better job, I could have. And I've seen tremendous success, but that was really because I had been in the same territory for forever, right? I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
really learned my territory. I knew who I was selling to, but if you're a new corporate person or a new entrepreneur, these are golden tips. The
Yeah.
idea of actually niching down, and I say niching for lack of a better word, because it's not even niching. You do have a niche that you need to be in, but then targeting, getting really specific as to who you're going to target is,
Mm-hmm.
I think, amazing because we don't do enough of that. Most
Yeah.
entrepreneurs, anyone who's in sales, that's where they struggle the most.
Well, one of the things I've done a lot of, and I always advise people, is if you have Sales Navigator, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can go in and you can put in let's say you have a client, right? ABC company, and you go in, I haven't found anybody that we've done business with other than startups, and they eventually have one that doesn't have a LinkedIn page. You know what I mean? Like it's so what I would do is I would go in, find a client, right? Or find a prospect, find one of our clients in LinkedIn, and then you hit lookalike, and it pulls companies that fit that criteria. You know, the other thing I would say too is I find, and I'm sure you may find this too, is I find a lot of times in sales organizations, and I follow this exclusively, and I built my company a little bit differently than most people. Is that here, like at my company, like at our companies, no one really prospects, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is because we want to automate it. So like, you see a lot of companies, they'll have say 10 salespeople. 8 of those salespeople are irrelevant, right? You only need 2 of them. And I've seen it time and time again. It's Pareto principle, right? Is that 80% of our results come from 20% of our efforts and vice
Yep.
versa.
Yep.
So I find a lot of times that, and I've done it specifically at my companies, is I hire the best of the best salespeople, like closers. I'm not interested in someone that prospects because we can do that ourselves. You can teach someone to cold call, right? I think one of the most effective cold callers that I've seen or cold calling training is that guy, Jeremy Miner. Have you seen him?
I know that name, so I'll
He's
have
really
to.
good. Yeah, like he'll get on the phone and he'll, I'm sure he's not cold calling now, but he'll get on the phone and he'll be like, is this John? And he's like ruffling papers and he's like, John, had a few minutes here, where most people are like, is this John? John, this is Rodney, blah, 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 like what? Click. But I think he's really good.
Yep.
Jeb Blunt is
Blunt.
incredible.
Yep.
He's great. I've read all his books. But I guess my point is that I've always used these tools to have a reason to call, right? So, like if you know that like a big event's coming, or that something's happening, right? Or like there's a renewal, right? Or whatever it may be, I would reach out to people at specific times. So I think what I'm going is that you can niche down like you're saying, and in addition to doing that, then find events, things that are happening that would impact them.
We would call those drivers, right? Find the
Drivers, yeah.
driver that would cause them to actually want to purchase. And I will just say, because I think this is important just to remind others in relation to, especially if they're newer in sales, the buyers buy today is very different than it was before. So when you talked about educating, I don't know that you could ever create a problem. You had to really go in and find a problem to solve
Mm-hmm.
to. But one could argue that because in the days it was spray and pray. So maybe if you had that approach, the more people that you approached, you'd get some opportunity. But that all being said, it was our job back then when you did find them. They had to have a problem, but it was your job to educate. Today,
Right.
there's absolutely no
They're
way.
already educated. Yeah.
They're already, I mean, by the time they get to you, they've already down selected. You're one of 3 to 5 vendors that they want. They already know their problem because they're sitting at their laptop more. Those days of going from meeting to meeting, physical meeting to meeting doesn't happen anymore because
Yeah.
we have this hybrid model. If you are going into work, you're still sitting in front of your laptop. You're just visible there in the office, but you're still actually doing those meetings there. But
Mm-hmm.
so that's just as a reminder, kind of a baseline. But I really want to go into some of the systems now that you
Sure.
talked about because we're already at the bottom of the hour. We have about 15 minutes left. Share with those that are out there what you mean by actually building out a prospecting system.
Yeah, so I would just use one. I would use startups, right? So like one thing I would do with startups is if I was targeting startups is I would find startup websites. So like for example, Indeed's a good place. Um, Y Combinator is a good spot. There's a tool I posted in my link something on LinkedIn. I don't know. I was might have been a story or something. I posted a while back about a tool that scrapes. Like you can
Mm-hmm.
scrape. It's easy because most of the time the scrapers you got to program and basically I literally I mean at this point a lot of it's automated, but if you're just starting out, I would find where everyone is, in this case startup. So I would go to Y Combinator and I would just scrape the pages, scrape down the data of the companies, and then find the contacts of those companies and find what they all share. So
Mm-hmm.
like for us, for example, in any vertical that we want to target, we'll find those keywords, right? So like if we're looking for HubSpot users, then we'll go, or companies that are using HubSpot, we'll go into, I call it active data versus static data. Like if you go into like Zoom Info or those companies and they're great, they have what I call static data, right? We don't know if that person's still there. We don't know what
Yep.
they're looking for. If you go on Indeed, for example, and someone is looking for a director of marketing, right? We know that they're looking for a director of marketing. So then you might send an email and you might say, hey, this is where it gets really, really granular. But so walk through the system. If I was doing this, I would set up so that I was on a schedule or someone else, or it was automated, was pulling these jobs down based upon the keyword. So let's say it's HubSpot.
Mm-hmm.
I would get those jobs down, and then what I would do is I would read through them and I would find it. So let's say someone said they use HubSpot, they're looking for a director of marketing. I would find whoever they report to. A lot of times it'll say in there, this person's reporting to whoever. I would email that person, right? And I would say, hi, Denise, this is, my name's Rodney Steele, whatever, blah, blah. I noticed that you were running, you're looking for a director of marketing, and some of the, you know, again, I'm just mixed up, but
Yep.
you were looking for cold email and whatever it is. And these, we've been able to help X amount, this company do this, blah, blah, blah. And you go into whatever it is they're looking for, right? And I think if you set it up that way, it takes quite a bit of work, but I think if you set it up so that it's automatic, right? Like when I first started and I didn't have all the automation and the team and everything, I used to do this stuff manually. Like even now, like when I create content, I pick one day a week and I just create content. I don't do anything else that day. Um, but yeah, I think first to really do it right, you got to find where the people are. First, you got to
Yeah.
figure out what you're doing. So I always say to people, right, you can sell anything if you know a few things. What are we selling? Who does it help? And where are those people?
Yep.
So once you figure out what it is, how you help, then you figure out where the people are. You go to where the people are, and then you figure out how to get that data, right? It might just be, if you're not tech savvy, just copying and pasting, right? Might be running a scraper. Really, really, sky's the limit. And then using that data, right? And I think that you should reach out through. I think you should connect with people on LinkedIn. I think that you should message them. I also think you should email them, and I think you should call them. Because the reason is because now you have a reason to call them, right? People are interested in whatever it is you're talking about, and you know that they need your help.
Yep.
And I think that's what it really comes down to. To really summarize it, I think in the past we were hoping people needed our help. Now, with all the tools available, we can pinpoint who needs it.
Exactly. And I think that there are even so where Rodney spends a lot of his time is really honing in on who to target and
Yeah.
automating that process so that he can get to the people that he really knows he has a greater success rate at having a conversation with at a faster pace. So
Right.
in the past, you might have had to sift through 100 people to get down to maybe 5 people that were interested. In
Mm-hmm.
Rodney's world right now, he may not even have to sift through 100. He can sift through 10 and have 8 people that might actually have a higher probability of talking to him because he's
Mm-hmm.
honed in on his list, which
Right.
is so important. Now, there are other tools. Once you have your list, you should, like Rodney said, you should go out and cold call them in this instance, yes, maybe the first one is a cold call, but then you start building it out to this warm call, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you should be utilizing multiple different forums or methodologies, phone, email, DM, etc., right? Because you do have to meet them where they are. And not everyone spends all of their time on LinkedIn, or not
That's
everyone
right.
sifts through all of their emails. And you'll never know until you actually try all of those mediums. So
That's
there
right.
are tools. Do you use a tool sort of like, and I don't want to I don't sponsor any specific solution, but if you look
Mhm.
at a solution like outreach, do you leverage outreach at all, or a solution like that that automates some of that process for you
Yeah,
once it's
we
ready
use
to
a lot of
go?
stuff. So I have custom built automation for pulling down the jobs and the companies and finding the people. And that's just different stacks of things. So we have Apollo, and we have I can't even think of all. We probably have 15, 20 different data sources. And then base for most everything we do is Google Sheets, right? Which is, I
Hmm.
mean, pretty common sense. I have my own email marketing platform. We had it built. I've used in the past, various Outreach is a good one. Woodpecker, Persist IQ is good. There's a lot of good ones. And then I think, just to touch on this, when you get down into like really granular stuff like I do with cold email and stuff, it's a little bit more of a process. What I always advise people, like I went down the rabbit hole with it, but I would say that unless you're going to make that your career, or a company doing cold email, you should probably outsource that, right? And I'm not saying like you got to use us, but you should. And the reason I say this is because you got to have certain domains, you got to warm them up. It's a
Yep.
lot of, you're jumping through Google's hoops at that point. But what I would say is that once you have their information, I always try to shoot up. So, like for example, if I'm looking to speak to the CEO or the CFO, I'll reach out to the CEO, right? We found that I found that a lot. We work a lot in PO, and PO you work a lot with the HR people or the HR team. A lot of times you reach out to the CFO because they're over the HR team, right? I always try to shoot above.
Yep.
That's helped a lot. The,
Which, by the
the
way, most people are fearful of doing because they lack the confidence and they don't know that they have relevancy. So they're fearful of doing that. If they have a
mhm.
service like you already do that for them so that they don't have to do that themselves.
Right. But the other thing too, right, is I feel like, and I understand the trepidation and the apprehension to reach out, but this is what I'll say, is that um, if you have a solution, right, like when I first started out doing PO, and people would be like, "I want to reach out to the CEO." Why not? I have a solution. Maybe he or she doesn't know about it. Maybe they do. I don't know. You know what I mean? I've never struggled with confidence. I get it. But the reason is right is like I have a legitimate product. You know what I mean? If I don't have a legitimate, I've never not had a legitimate product or service. But if I did, I probably would feel that way. But if you have a legitimate product or service, you shouldn't feel nervous about the person's title, right? I mean, you can start a company tomorrow and call yourself the CEO. It doesn't mean you're, I I mean, you probably experienced this too. I've met a ton of CEOs that didn't have any sense, right? When I went to work at a startup, they had no idea how to sell, and everybody in there had, it looked like, it was like MIT, Harvard, all these schools, and nobody in there knew how to sell.
Well, but for me, so I wasn't fear I haven't been fearful in a long time, but I can remember starting out I was
Oh yeah,
fearful. And I sold long distance to businesses door to door. That was way back in the day when
yeah.
telecom was actually a thing, right?
Door to door is the toughest thing in the world.
Oh
I'll
my
say
gosh,
that. That's another level.
that right there, if you can
Cold
sell
calling
in
is
that
a breeze.
environment, you can sell anywhere, right? But
Yeah,
so I
that's
sold in the days when so for me, I wasn't quite as fearful, but I didn't have it at that time. I didn't have a product that I actually believed in because I mean, it was telecom. So I
right.
wasn't so quick. But once I actually moved into those roles where I actually sold products that were good, that were, products that I knew could solve to a problem, that was when I actually didn't have any fear because I'd
Mhm.
had a great background in having had to
That's right.
sell door to door, right?
That's exactly true.
But
Yeah,
the
that's a nightmare. Well, it's another thing I struggle with too, right? And I always find this, and I, when I first started Dinsmore Steel, people were like, who's your competitors? And I would say, oh, I don't have any competitors. And I don't know who it was now, but they said to me one day, they go, well, then you don't have a business. I said, what do you mean? And here's what I mean. A lot of people argue with you that they they're the only ones that do this. They don't have any competitors. AT&T and Verizon and I forget the other phone company, but what is it? Sprint, T-Mobile.
Well, yeah, Sprint's no longer in
Yeah.
existence. T-Mobile, yeah.
Um, they're commodities. Like here's what I mean. Almost everything we do and almost everything anybody sells is a commodity, right? And I feel like a lot of times people are like, well, if it's a commodity, it's got to be transactional. Everything is transactional, but your style doesn't have to be transactional, right? Your selling style. So, like for example, I work with POs. There's 400 plus POs in the country. Obviously, it's a commodity. cold email marketing, all that stuff's a commodity. The other thing I would say too is that, look at ChatGPT, how advanced it is. And you could argue the debate, well, it's not a commodity. Technically it is, because you have Grok, you have whatever
Yep.
Google's doing now, Gemini, I think it's
Bard,
called,
you've got
Bard, all that.
Gemini.
Yeah.
Yep, you
All
got
these
all
different
that.
tools. So, I mean, you have 3 or 4 people doing it, and it's a commodity, right? Who do you like better? I happen to personally like ChatGPT, but, its own preference. They have Copilot now, like all these different tools. My point is that as advanced as AI is, it has, it's almost turning into a commodity. So everything is commoditized unless you have a cure for something. So I find that a lot of people will say, well, I don't feel confident in this product. Just do it. You know what I mean? Again, at the end of
Well,
the day, right? If you find people that fit your profile and you have a relevant message, a good product/service, and you deliver it the right way, then
and
it's
I
either it's
say
out of your
now,
hands.
I mean, really, today, maybe not so much so 5 years ago, but today we as the salespeople are the differentiator, because
Right.
because we mentioned that now buyers are much more educated. By the time they come to you, they've already down selected. You're one of 3 to 5 of the vendors or salespeople that they're going to work with if they've stalked you on LinkedIn, right?
Mm-hmm.
But because of that, your job now is no longer to educate. Your job is to differentiate yourself from all the other vendors, and that's only going to be through the experience that you create with them, the experience with
Mm-hmm.
you, with the company, with the product. So now your confidence should be from within, that you can work on the human aspect of the sales process, which is what I talk about all the time, right? How to improve the human aspect by differentiating
Mm-hmm.
yourself, by providing them an experience, not a experience.
I
It's
don't think,
plural.
I to be honest with you, I don't think there is any, I don't, like, people always say, what do you think will happen to jobs? And you can't replace sales.
You can't.
You know what I mean?
You
Because a
can
lot of
replace
times,
job tasks within
right.
sales. Yes.
Yeah. Like, I mean, a lot of the stuff we used to do manually now is, AI or, whatever it may be. But yeah, I would say that, I don't think anything is ever going to be able to replace sales, because you need that human interaction. People like, I mean, me personally, I like dealing with people. I always have, you know?
Well, and two, if you think about large transactional deals, people are still 95% of buying decisions are made by emotion. You're not
Right.
going to be able to invoke an emotion if you're or engage in an emotional way with a robot or a machine. I mean, we as salespeople are going to be the ones that create that emotion. So I think what we've talked about here on the first episode, on the launch, on the inaugural episode of Sellovatorz, is really how to build these systems
Mm-hmm.
that prospect for you rather than you having to prospect. What we've talked about here is really honing in on your list. Instead of spraying and praying like we've done in the past, instead of generalizing, whether you're an entrepreneur or in the corporate world, find out not only who your ICP is, that part's the easier part, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
should be the easier part, but actually find where they are, like find where those ICPs reside. An example that Rodney used was, if you're selling to PEOs and you want to sell to an 80, you're a PEO, but you want to find other PEOs, go to the indeed.com.
Mm-hmm.
Look for those that are hiring for ADP, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it ADP?
Yeah, like a lot of times what will happen, yeah, to kind of clarify, is a lot of times what will happen is that people will put in there, like, we use such and such vendor, or we do this, or we do that. Like, a lot of times people put in there, we use HubSpot, or we use Salesforce, or whatever it is. So when you reach out to them, they're using Salesforce. So one thing I would do is, if I was doing this, right, just to kind of touch on it, is if someone was using Salesforce, I would reach out and say, I'm not sure if you're currently using Salesforce or not, right? But if you are, we help, whatever it is you do.
Yep.
And then 99% of the time they'll write back and be like, oh yeah, I do use Salesforce. Great. Then we can help you. Right. Because at the end of the day, you got to remember, right, in my mind, right, when you're sending, like, when you're cold calling and stuff, you're doing what you're doing. When you are emailing, you're trying to get a reply. That's it, right? You're not
Yeah.
trying to sell anything on email. You're just literally trying to get them to tell you yes or no, or, whatever it may be.
which uh, which I think is a great way to get to a close. Really, the way you're going to differentiate today is by uber personalization, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what Rodney is really telling us is automate so that you're actually able to uber personalize, so that you can get that engagement. Because you're
That's right.
right, when you're reaching out by a cold call, whether it's email, DM, or phone, or any other medium for that matter, it is really to be short and simple so that you can just get a response. Once you get a response, then you can start to have, because if you get a response, that means they're willing to engage. And from there, you
Hmm.
can expand on that and you can start to grow the relationship. I will say, or I will ask maybe, in relation to the sales cycle now, have you seen a reduction in the time needed in a sales cycle, or have you seen, or has that remained the same? It's just that you've been able to uber personalize and get to them faster than normal. But
I
from
think I think it's definitely shorter. It's definitely a shorter cycle. It really is. And the other thing I would say too is that when you're when you're personalizing, when you're reaching out to people, and this is a big one. If you're reaching out to the C-suite, they're not going to read a long email. Like if I email you, right? I'm not going to write you a 4-page email about how I started and this and that. I'm going to write you an email and say, hey, listen, are we good for tomorrow? Whatever the messaging. It's like when I send a text message, I'll be like, I'm on my way, right? I'm not going to write down 45. Just call her. Just call them. And I think a lot of times people will write, even on LinkedIn messaging, like even my message, my opening message, is something clever. But if I was emailing a CEO about something or a C-level executive, I would say whatever their name is, right? You always put their name in there and say something like, are you currently using, or, ask them a question, because they're used to having short, quippy copy.
Yep.
Or like that, that's how they respond. Like if I've written an email that's over 4 pages long, it's come from the lawyer, you know what I mean? And I'm just poured, you know what I mean? Like no one,
Well, but
it just
even
doesn't make sense.
let's bring that down, because reality is not many people are going to do 4 pages. I mean, even 4 paragraphs, right? That's way
Oh,
too
I'm sorry.
long.
I said paragraph. I mean, I'm sorry. I said pages. I mean, paragraph. Sorry.
I
I know.
wanted to qualify
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Sorry.
even four. I
Four
mean,
paragraphs. Yeah.
you don't even need a full paragraph.
Yeah.
It should be super, super simple.
Hmm.
I mean, I want to be
Yeah.
respectful of everyone's time, so we're getting close to the end. I want to quickly summarize. I've already done a little bit of that, but I think the key takeaways that I've heard are that, one, we should automate our prospecting system so
Hmm.
that we can get to more people at a faster pace. Gives us an opportunity to uber personalize so that we differentiate ourselves. Make your messages short.
Hmm.
Make sure that you're going to where those clients are to even, or those prospects are to even find them. And really, ultimately, what you want to be able to do is cut down your selling time and actually sell more product. And the only way you can do that is really by leveraging some of the tips that I just summarized as takeaways that Rodney shared with us. So, Rodney, I'd like to leave you with the opportunity to give a last message that takeaway message for everyone, and then share
Sure.
with everyone how they can work with you and where to find you.
Sure. So, yeah, I would say, first figure out, yeah, let's reiterate what you said, figure out who you're looking for, figure out where they are, and then figure out their problems and then message them. I'm at dinsmoresteel.com. We're the largest PO broker in the country, and I am a partner in Volare.com, which is a cold email marketing company. That if you want to figure out how to automate the prospecting, we literally do it for you. The thing I'll say about automating the prospecting is it came about because I had to figure it out, right? There was sink or swim, you know what I mean? Like I got to figure
Because
out how
as
to
you
make
already
this work.
heard, he doesn't love to cold call, right?
No, I hate cold calling. I'm terrible at it too, I really am. I'm the worst. I am the worst cold caller in the world.
Well, we thank you for being here. If you
Thank
want
you for
to
having me.
find Rodney, you can find him here on LinkedIn or and I put that in the scroll down on the
Hmm.
bottom, at Rodney Steele. You can also find him on his 2 websites. Either he or I will put those in the comments below. You can reach out to him as it relates to PEO, but more importantly, if you're on here in sales and you want to learn how to do a better job at cold calling, actually automating that process, he's your guy. He's got a team of people who can help you do that more effectively. And I've already talked to him. It's not very expensive in comparison to the amount of time that you spend. So he's always willing to have a conversation with you. Let him know, DM him, connect with him, or follow him.
Follow me.
Yes, follow him, and then send him a good DM. And if he likes it, remember, keep it short and simple. And if he likes it, he'll engage back with you. So I
That's
want
right.
to thank you for being here with
Thank you
us,
for having me.
Rodney, especially on my first episode. I want to thank all of those who are still out there with us. We've had quite a few people throughout, and I keep looking at my screen so I can pay attention. But
Hey, Jake.
I thank everyone for being there. Yes, hi, Jake. Coldy was out there. Darnice was out there. I know there were a bunch of others that just didn't engage with us. We thank everyone for being out there. If you're joining us live, again, thank you for having been here. If you're joining us by Team Replay, let us know that. And by putting Team Replay, we'll come back and comment. We thank everyone for being there. This is Tuesdays at 9 a.m. You can find me also tomorrow morning doing my CAF AI chat. I talk about all things sales, AI, and humanity, bringing them all three together so that you can kill your sales. So thank you very much for being here. Hope everyone has a great rest of your day, and I will see you guys here soon. Thank you.
Adios.
Now bear with me as I end the stream.